Hitting the button. Boom. All right. So, welcome everybody. Glad you guys all joined us here tonight. I hope everybody's having a great evening. Got some, decent birding in. We had some fantastic winds coming through here. So my name is Edward. If you haven't met me before, I'm sorry. I would love to meet y'all in person someday soon here. But in the meantime, welcome to Birds Bytes. My name is Edward. I'm president of Chicago Ornithological Society, the fine organization that puts on this virtual series. Like I mentioned, we are recording tonight's event, so I will be keeping an eye on everybody's, audio and chat, at least for the first portion of the evening here, so that we don't have any weird background noises. I will be slapping down the mute hammer. Additionally, tonight's theme is Hawkwatching. Unlike previous Birds and Bytes episodes where it's more kind of a standard presentation style, we're hoping this to be a little bit more conversational and casual. So Adam, our awesome, fantastic host here tonight, does have some images and slides he'll be sharing with us, but that will not be the bulk of the program here. We're hoping to really kind of get into any questions that you guys have about Hawkwatching, what it is, how it is, etc., and as well as maybe hoping to get some just really fun stories and make this a little bit more conversational. Additionally, if you have questions or anything, comments, feel free to light up the chat with them. We will be looking at that, and in general, trying to keep track of your comments and questions here. We will also, I'm going to do my best to call on you in person, I, myself, or Adam, so you can actually ask your question in person if you're willing to do that. Just again, so we make this as personal as we can, even through this virtual medium. Last but not least, we have our partner brewery. And oh my God, I wrote it down and then I proceeded to forget it. That's a great look. Obviously, this is Birds and Bytes, which is a riff off of our Birds and Beers event that we, unfortunately can't really do in person right now. But here's hoping that maybe sometime in the near future things will get better and we will be able to do so. But sorry, I didn't see. Is Chris Mikulek here? He's our guy to usually introduce our brew. I don't see him, so I guess I'll go ahead and do that real quick. And our featured brewery for the day is Half Day Brewing, which has been a longtime partner for Hawkwatching events for many years, and we are really excited to have them as just a featured brewery here with us tonight on our Birds and Bytes event here. So definitely, if you're out there Hawkwatching, hit them up for a brew when you're done, because that is the place to go. And I guess last but not least, obviously we're Chicago Ornithological Society. Beyond these virtual events, we are back to our in-person events and trips as well. So definitely check out our website, just chicagobirder.org, for all kinds of upcoming events, including our next episode of Birds and Bytes, which will be taking place on November 5th, I believe, if I've gotten that date. Yes, November 5th, and several in-person hikes we have coming up through October and November, including a big sit taking place this Saturday at Big Marsh Park. Anyway, y'all didn't come here to listen to me yak. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Adam Sell. Let's give him a big round of virtual applause here. Hey, Adam, take it away.
All right. Thank you guys for all coming out. Like we said, we're going to try to make this a lot more conversational necessarily than me just giving a presentation. And you guys are kind of in luck. I didn't know this was a thing you could do in 2020, but I managed to somehow not save a presentation I was doing and lost a bunch of slides. So if there was any chance of boredom, I've reduced it by a good amount. So I'm also kind of just rolling with the punches here. So we're just going to go over just a few parts about what is a Hawkwatch, what's the deal with Hawkwatching is kind of what I'm going to be calling this, and just quickly go over Hawkwatching, a few things about raptors in the area, and then I just want to open it up to everybody else just to ask any questions right away. So what's the deal with Hawkwatching? If you're on Facebook or social media around this time of year, you start to see a lot of photos of people around picnic benches looking out into the sky. You start seeing weird weather maps, and people are getting all excited about really cold weather, and you're seeing a lot of photos of raptors and maybe people prognosticating about it and saying, oh, this is going to be a really good Hawk Day. So I just want to talk about what is hawk watching, and to talk about.
Adam, this is Nathan. You're in presenter mode, by the way.
Oh, you guys can see the whole thing. That's awful. Thank you.
No problem.
Spoilers.
1 second. That is a massive bummer. I didn't mean to do that.
Just thought I'd catch you.
All right, let's try that again. This better? All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nathan. So if we're going to talk about it, the main thing about hawk watching is that hawks are awesome. That's kind of the basis of it. I've been hawk watching for about 11 years, and without fail, whenever I meet somebody who walks by the hawk watch and I tell them what I'm doing, they automatically have a story about a hawk that they've seen. When I get new people into birding at my work, or if I run into somebody and they ask me what I'm doing and I tell them I'm watching birds, without fail, they have a story about a hawk or a raptor or an eagle. They are the ultimate gateway drug into watching birds. And I would say they're also the ultimate gateway drug into conservation. And I've been birding my whole life, and I'm still enthralled by raptors, and so I get it. And so I think hawk watching, whether you're new to birding or you've been birding for a long time, I understand the desire to get to know more about it. And usually when I'm at the hawk watch, I usually have somebody, this is just a chance to show off a bald eagle photo, because bald eagles are also amazing. And you get later into birding and you sometimes hear people talk about how everybody has a story about a bald eagle. And maybe early on I thought hearing stories about bald eagles was annoying, or I can only hear so many bald eagle stories. But if I think about it, how cool is it that everybody has some kind of story about seeing a bald eagle? And a lot of the people that walk by the hawk watch these days, they have a story about a bald eagle they've seen recently. They have a story about a bald eagle they've seen when they were kids. And if the person who's visiting is old enough, what I think is great is that they have the opportunity to tell me about how bald eagles have come back. And so, like I said, ultimate gateway drug into getting into birding is going to be hawk watching. And so that's kind of the start. Hawk watching at its core is kind of just plain old watching hawks. But I think the best way to get involved and to see more hawks and to learn more about raptors is to visit a hawk watch. There's no better way to get to know raptors in the area than visiting a hawk watch. This is from the Fort Sheridan Hawkwatch. The coordinator at that site. This was taken in late September for the iOS Big Sit. You can kind of see a lot of telltale signs of hawk watches in this photo. You've got a bunch of scopes lined up everywhere. You've got chairs, coffee, food, a bunch of different layers of clothing, jugs of water. I think this is Tom Lally's jugs of water in the background, which goes to show that when you go to a hawk watch, you're going to be there for a while. So our area here, we have 3 main hawk watches that you could visit. Illinois Beach State Park up at the Wisconsin border at the north unit of Illinois Beach State Park. They've been counting for over 20 years. They're kind of the original hawk watch, unless you count the counts that happened in the 1980s. The 1980s counts happened on, before they knew it was a big deal, in the 70s as well. They were counting on an old asbestos pile looking north from Waukegan down past Greenwood Avenue and viewing raptors going from there. But that was kind of the start when we knew that hawks were moving along the lakeshore. So Illinois Beach has been doing it for 20 years. Fort Sheridan is about 17 miles as the Sharpie flies straight down to Fort Sheridan. We started this watch in 2014. It's started off as exploratory, and when we began to realize that we were seeing different birds, some of the same, but also different birds in the Illinois Beach State Park Hawk Watch, that we realized it was definitely something that we wanted to continue doing. The last one is the Green Valley Hawk Watch out in DuPage. They count from Green Valley, the landfill, the filled-in landfill. So it's not the most accessible one. You can only get there on the weekends, but they are also a very important piece to the puzzle when it comes to understanding migrating hawks in this area and how they relate to the city, how they relate to the lake. So I wanted to talk a little bit about hawk watching versus watching hawks. Okay, so if you go to a hawk watch, you're probably there to watch hawks, but you're also going to see people that are really intent and busy and focused on a really busy day, and those are the counters. So at a hawk watch, there are official counters and observers, and their main job is to make sure that every migrating hawk is counted. So on the left-hand side here, I've got a count sheet. It's really small, but that's basically a data sheet that people would fill in. So for every hour, on the half hour, we're taking weather data to make sure that we're keeping track of what we're seeing, what the weather's looking like during the entire count. We're keeping track of migrating raptors by the hour. And all of that data that we're collecting over hopefully an 8-hour period of the day goes into a website called Hawk Count. Hawkcount.org is brought on by the Hawk Migration Association of North America. So I'll put that in the chat in a little bit, but Hawk Count is a great place to see what hawk watchers are doing across the country. We all follow a standardized protocol. So every single hawk watch across the country overall is basically following the exact same protocol as to how they're counting raptors. And so we're able to then, over a long period of time, understand more about raptor populations. Our season starts, for most hawk watches, starts at some point in August and goes all the way until the end of November. The goal is to get between 7 and 8 hours, maybe more and sometimes a little bit less, depending on the weather, of having somebody out there every single day to get a full sense of what's migrating past these different hawk watch sites. So you can see on the bottom here, I've got a little photo that I took from my hawk watch. You've got the coffee, and that is a row of pitch counters. And we use those pitch counters on really busy days. My wife actually made that pitch counter for me. It's called the Count. And so when you're having a really busy day and you're counting a bunch of raptors, this is something that can really help you out, is to be able to keep track of them and keep track of everything in the sky. And it's a really fun experience. But the hawk watchers, they're also doing it for science. It's not just about having fun and watching hawks. It's also about collecting important data, and data that these data can then influence what we know about raptor populations. It can influence conservation, because this is the main way we understand raptor populations. We understand how raptor populations are changing based upon hawk counts, because going to the breeding grounds to actually figure out what's going on with raptors becomes really tricky. Sharp-shinned hawks, for example, breed all the way up in boreal Canada. To do a true study of that would be very intrusive, a lot of money, and probably not worth it when you can get all of the data from hawk watches. And over time, so for example, Illinois Beach, they've been counting for over 20 years. After about 10 years of good data, so good hourly data, they're able to actually see population trends, and those population trends can then go into something called the Raptor Population Index, where they're tracking raptor populations across the US. It's one of the reasons we know that kestrels are declining. It's one of the reasons that we know that bald eagles and some vultures, or bald eagles and osprey, are increasing, is because of the data that's been collected by hawk watches across the country. Okay, so you've decided that you want to make the jump. You want to go in, you want to get hawk watching. You choose the first open weekend that you have in September. You show up, and this is what the counter looks like. Not good. This is actually my wife sleeping it off on a really, really slow day at the hawk watch. So if you want to go to a hawk watch, the counters are there because they care about science and keeping track of everything. But if you care about seeing hawks, you kind of have to be a little bit of a weatherman if you want to enjoy seeing raptors, especially in this area. We live in an area where the biggest hawk flights are very much weather dependent. So if you want to really enjoy the raptors, you need to make sure you're choosing the right day. So there is such thing as the wrong day for a lot of raptors. There is no wrong day to go hawk watching, in my opinion. If you want to come sweat it out with me in August, I would love to have you there. But if you want to see a lot of raptors, you're probably going to have to pay attention to the weather. And so this is a little wind map here from a few days ago, or actually this is a cold front in August of a few years ago. The best winds that you can have that involve hawk watching, this is a general statement. There is no perfect predictions. for migrating hawks and when the big day is going to be. But generally, what you want to do is you want to go to a hawkwatch on the lakefront after a cold front with west winds behind it, and obviously no rain or massive amounts of snow. So if you write down anything about when to go to the hawkwatch, it's cold fronts with west winds. Raptors, when they're migrating, the main thing they're doing is they're trying to conserve energy. Okay, and so they're getting up in the morning, they're getting on a thermal, they're getting thermal, just that, you know, hot air rising off the ground. They're getting as high as they can on that thermal, and then they're going to coast to the next thermal, catch that, and go to the next one and keep going. The west winds does two things. One, it pushes them towards the lakefront, which is where we're counting. And then when a raptor sees the lake, they're not going to want to get pushed out over the lake and cross the lake. They're going to, because there's no thermals over the lake, there's nowhere to land, there's no food. So they're going to use the edge of the lake to kind of act like a wall, like a leading line that kind of takes the raptors down. So a way of thinking of it is like the expressway. You've got raptors all the way up in Green Bay and farther west, and they're migrating down, and they hit this wall, and it kind of acts like a pipeline, and it sends them down this way. Every single day, hawks are migrating. So if you go to the hawkwatch on an east wind and you're not seeing any birds, it's not that the hawks aren't migrating. It's just that you're not seeing them because we're not going to see them from that site. So if you want to see a lot of raptors, you've got to be prepared to come out after a cold front in September. It's super nice. You can, you know, just put on a flannel and show up and feel nice and warm. Late October, November, it's going to be cold, but there's also going to be a lot of raptors to see. So we're going to talk a little bit about what to expect when it comes to raptors. You can see I'm going to go over this really quick because we could take a whole hour to go over all of this. But I'm going to talk about our first few raptors. These are called the bread and butter species. These are the most common raptors that we see. This one is a juvenile sharp-shinned hawk. It's probably one of our most common raptors that we see in big numbers. They're in the family of accipiters. They've got long tails and broad wings, and they hunt birds. So they've got that long tail. So when they're chasing after a bird, it's like a rudder, and they can quickly change direction. And so that's one of the major families of raptors that we see is accipiters. So you're looking for broad wings, long tail. That's an accipiter. Sharp-shinned hawks are about the size of a blue jay. They're real frantic when they fly. And they're one of the first raptors that when you go to a hawkwatch, you get to learn how to identify from a distance. Another one is the ever-present and ever-common red-tailed hawk. Me and Edward were just talking about how some people act like they're a trash bird because they're everywhere, but we both kind of think it's cool because red-tailed hawks are so adaptable. They can soar to hunt, they can perch and hunt, they can kite, hover, they can do it all, and they're very common. And they're also a raptor that I kind of call the Goldilocks Raptor because their proportions are just right in every way. Their tail isn't that long. Their wings kind of have a gentle slope to them, not too pointed, not too blunt. And they're in a family called Buteos. So they're the family of soaring raptors that have shorter tails and broad wings. So Buteos include red-tailed hawks, red-shouldered hawks, rough-legged hawks. So it's another big genus of birds that we're looking for. So when you're out looking for a raptor, one of the first things you might say to yourself is, does it have a long tail? If it has a long tail, it's either an accipiter or a harrier. Or does it have a shorter tail and broad wings and it's soaring? It means it's probably a Buteo. Almost every raptor that we see in the sky that's not an accipiter, one of the first questions we ask ourselves is, why is it not a red-tailed hawk? And so when you go to a hawkwatch and you see a red-tailed hawk, don't just say, oh, it's a red-tailed hawk. Stare at that sucker for as long as you can, because almost every other ID point that somebody at a hawkwatch is going to give you is going to be based off a red-tailed hawk. So when there's a distant rough-legged hawk, they're going to say, well, it's like a red-tailed hawk, but the wings are skinnier. Or if it's a red-shouldered hawk, they're going to say it's like that, but the tail's longer. And so knowing the red-tailed hawk, knowing the most common raptor is really important. At the hawkwatch, we also have seasonal raptors. And these are raptors that come through at different times of the year. Red-tailed hawks can show up at any time of the year. Sharp-shinned hawks tend to be focused more in October, but can be seen throughout the entire count season. This is a Peregrine Falcon. They are a specialty of late September. So another thing about hawk watching is knowing what to expect at what times of year. Late September is the peak for them. We actually broke our record and had over nearly 50 in a day at Fort Sheridan this year, but that was in late September. And today, only a few weeks later, we only had one in near perfect conditions. So there's a very small window for seeing these guys. Another one is osprey, same kind of concept. They are a September specialty, late August, but mostly in September and late September is when you can get osprey migrating over the Hawkwatches. This one, I think, was taken this year on another really good day for osprey. So if you have a specific raptor you want to see, beyond just looking at eBird, go to Hawk Count and look at the different charts that they have about when raptors migrate. Feel free to ask me any questions about that, but they are a common raptor in September. Another big one that we have here is this is a little falcon called a Merlin. Merlin are one of our most numerous raptors as well. In fact, what makes our Hawk Count cool is that, or this region cool, is that Illinois Beach has the second highest Merlin count, single day count record in the country. Illinois Beach had over, I think it was over 700 Merlin in one day, and I think 2007. The only other count that rivals that would be Cape May. And the East Coast is well known for massive movements of Merlin. And outside of the East Coast, our little stretch, Illinois Beach and Fort Sheridan, has some of the highest Merlin counts in the country. So it's remarkable that these birds migrate through in such large numbers in this area. They have a high breeding population in Wisconsin and Canada, and they love that long shoreline that you have on Lake Michigan. But there's still a lot of mystery as to why we see so many Merlin, but so few kestrels. But Merlin are one of our biggest migrants. On a good day in late October, specifically around the Columbus Day weekend, you can see a bunch of them. I'm not sure what the total we had today, but we had over 20 of them at Fort Sheridan today. But a good day of Merlin can be over 100 Merlin a day, moving along the lakeshore. They're pugnacious, they're fast, they're mean. They'll grab a goldfinch out of a bush without even stopping their flight. They're one of our more incredible raptors. Later in the season, so specifically right around now, we start getting a lot of turkey vultures. They migrate through in pretty big numbers in this area. I know Steve's on this call. He's had pretty big numbers over his rooftop in Chicago. This is the best time of year to start seeing them as they start migrating out of here, and it starts getting a little bit colder. As it starts getting a little bit colder, we also start seeing a lot more eagles, bald eagles, golden eagles start coming through around this time and on. Goshawks are another specialty of late October and November. And another one is this red-shouldered hawk. This is not my best red-shouldered hawk photo, but I like it because it's a little bit farther away, and it forces you to look at things beyond just looking for the red shoulders or looking for the tail bands or whatever you would do for a red-shouldered hawk. This is a red-shouldered hawk for a few reasons. One, probably the most obvious, is that at the base of the primaries, they're pale. And so if you get them in the right light, right at the base of the primaries, you're going to see these little pale commas, and they're really distinct. And it really contrasts with the black feathers at the tip. But also, at a distance, you can kind of see that their wings aren't necessarily held straight across their body like a cross. They're kind of pushed forward like they're reaching for something in front of them. Like maybe somebody threw them a baseball and they're about to get ready to catch it. They kind of reach their hands forward. And also the ends of the wings are kind of blunt tipped. But these are things that, especially how they're reaching, and I can't show you this, but how they flap is almost as distinctive as the red shoulders or the red breast on an adult. Their shape is really important, and shape plays a really big role at a Hawkwatch. So for example, you might go to a Hawkwatch and you're going to see everybody looking at a bird and they're getting all excited. And let's say somebody yells out Mississippi kite. Okay, it's a really rare bird in this area. So you get someone yells out Mississippi kite, you're thinking to yourself, all right, I know what a Mississippi kite looks like. I've been studying the books. I know they've got this pale head, and the back of the secondaries have this nice white line, and if I'm going to get a really good look, and I'm going to see these rufous primaries sticking out, and it's going to be awesome. I'm going to be able to identify the dragonfly that it's carrying. You know, I can't wait to see this Mississippi kite. And then they start giving you directions as to where the bird is. They're pointing the tree where it's at, and you finally get a look at it, and this is what you see. When you go to a Hawkwatch, we do sometimes get close birds, but a lot of our hawks are far, far away. And it almost sounds insulting sometimes when you go to a Hawkwatch, and a Hawkwatch, the counter says, oh, I've got a sharp-shinned hawk, you know, and you're like, well, where? And, you know, you get excited to see it, and they point out this really distant bird, and it's a speck to you in the sky. I think my wife called them pepper flakes. And you might get frustrated and want to just, pack up your stuff and head out to the car. But I would tell you two things. One, the hawks do come close, so be patient. But also, identifying hawks from a distance, though it kind of seems impossible, and I don't have time to go over it all tonight, is definitely something that people can learn. The reason why you struggle with it, or people struggle with it, is because your field guides give you perfect little pictures of what a raptor is supposed to look like, and it gives you field marks for if the bird was 20 feet away from you. Luckily, we do have field guides today that give you, and if anybody has any questions about that, I can throw some good resources in the chat. But in reality, going to a Hawkwatch and spending time with distant raptors with somebody who can tell you what the bird is can drastically improve what you know about a raptor. And even some of the close-up features, the farther away they become, can almost become more distinct, and they can become more of a way of learning how to identify them. For example, a sharp-shinned hawk, everybody talks about how their head doesn't stick out beyond the leading edge of their wings. When you see a close raptor, like if I go back to that sharp-shinned hawk photo that I took, this is just me kind of going off the cuff here. Let's take a look at this. Okay. Can you tell for sure if that raptor's head is sticking beyond the wings? Like, maybe it kind of is, but I was just told in the field guide that they don't really have a large head projection. But when the bird's really close, you're like, well, maybe it does have a large head projection. Maybe it's a Cooper's hawk. I can't tell. When this bird is a speck, when it's far away, it almost looks headless because the exaggerations become greater. So the fact that its head is barely sticking out behind the leading edge of the wing, when it becomes super far away, it becomes more exaggerated, and that field mark all of a sudden makes sense. So sometimes when you get too close to something at a Hawkwatch, it actually becomes more difficult to ID. When it's farther away, sometimes those field marks really stand out. And a great example of that would be the sharp-shinned head. Okay. We talked about how you're disappointed about Mississippi kites not being close. When you're at a good raptor site as well, a good hawk watching site, it's not just about migrating hawks as well. At Fort Sheridan, we try to keep track of every single migrant that we're seeing. Fort Sheridan is well known as all of the lakefront sites and Green Valley for massive sandhill crane migration in mid to late November. It's really cold when it happens, but a good day at the Hawkwatch can produce thousands of cranes. And if you've never had I know a lot of people in the Chicagoland area have seen a few cranes when you're migrating overhead in the city, but going to a Hawkwatch site and seeing it happen in full, really taking in a full day of crane migration is really something to see. As well, we also get Tundra Swan migration. Earlier in the season, we get large migrations of warblers. This year is a very good year for pine siskins and other finches. We've seen thousands of pine siskins migrating over Fort Sheridan this year. And so it's been a really, really fun time at the Hawkwatch this year to kind of take in some of the birds that are not hawks. But the main thing about a Hawkwatch, beyond just the raptors and everything, it really is a unique community. I know people that are very much into birding, and hawks happens to be one of the things they're into as well. I know people that are 100% their main focus is hawks and hawk watching, and it all doesn't matter when you're at the Hawkwatch because it's just a really good community. It's a great time to get to know people who are in the area that also appreciate birds. And I can't recommend getting out to a Hawkwatch as a great way to get to know people, a great way to get to understand the phenomena of migration. It's witnessing something that's bigger than ourselves. To me, it's very powerful to witness migration, and I really hope to see a lot of you guys out there. And that is what I've got for you guys. A really quick primer about hawk watching. Sorry, it was kind of cut short there for me with some of the slides that were missing, but I think at this time, let's just open it up to questions that people have.
Yeah, we've had a couple accumulate in the chat here while you're going. The first main one being Charlotte Pavelka. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
I can kind of read it off. I think that's a good question.
Sure, yeah, you can go with that route as
So
well.
she was asking, is Birdcast relevant for hawkwatching? So Birdcast is a website brought out by Cornell that kind of tracks migrating birds at night. So most hawks don't migrate at night. Some osprey have been noted to migrate at night, harriers. Obviously, owls are migrating at night. So I don't think you're going to use Birdcast necessarily to track migrating raptors, but you could definitely use it to understand what's happening to the hawk food. So when you've got massive amounts of birds leaving an area and massive amounts of birds migrating, that's the food source for a lot of raptors. A lot of accipiters rely on birds. A lot of falcons rely on birds. And so I wouldn't say it's necessarily a way to track if it's going to be a good day for hawk watching, but a lot of times in our region, really big movements of birds overnight also involve the same kind of weather that you would want to have for a hawk watch.
We also had a question about the kite, if that was taken this year.
Yeah, but not at the Hawkwatch. The distant one, yes. The close one was taken down in southern Illinois, where they were just feeding over dragonflies, and so it was amazing. But the distant one was taken this year. That was a migrating Mississippi kite over Fort Sheridan, where you had to really rely on shape and flight style. They're called kites for a reason. They're extremely buoyant in flight. So most raptors that we see around here, when they try to get some extra height, they're just kind of circling in these lazy circles to get up. A kite, I don't know how they do it, but they can just be circling and all of a sudden like hit an elevator and they just rise up. And that's what that bird did. I saw it low over the trees. It grabbed the dragonfly and then just kind of started shooting up. And that was kind of the giveaway besides the shape that we were going to have a Mississippi kite.
It's funny you should say that. It seems like what Christine Naya is describing in the chat here. Christine, you kind of want to describe that a little bit more in person, what you're seeing?
Yeah, feel free to get involved in unmuting if you want to.
Well, I mean, we only saw it for a few moments, and they went behind the trees, so we couldn't follow them visually. But we looked up and there were just about 30 hawks just circling overhead and moving southeast from where we are. I know they weren't red tails,
I mean,
but I was wondering. What, go on.
That's almost a guaranteed kettle of, they call them kettles when they kind of get a large number of birds. They kind of look like a roaring kettle of something. Those are a kettle of broadwing hawks.
Broadwing hawks.
Yeah, late September, specifically early October.
Yeah.
Mostly late September, but they can get them through, moving through now, is the peak time for them to migrate. In the woods, they tend to be kind of solitary, but in migration, they end up joining in massive groups and migrating together. So a kettle of 30 birds in September, early October is almost certainly broadwing hawks, or if they were really big, it could be turkey vultures as well.
Not turkey vultures.
Not turkey, so smaller ones.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like broadwing hawks.
And they had a straight tail in the back. They didn't have the big fan. Yeah.
Okay. It probably was broadwing hawks. That would be my guess.
All right. Somebody told us they might be Swainsons, but
that would be amazing. That would definitely be if you were out west.
Yeah,
they don't
that's
migrate
what I thought.
Out west, or you go to the Texas sites, or down to Veracruz and Panama. They migrate through in massive numbers. But out here, there's one breeding pair that we know of in Illinois.
Right.
Otherwise, there's hardly any. We tend to get one to two a year or every other year at a Hawkwatch site, and that's about it. And it's a big deal. That was one we were looking for today that we struck out on. As far as I know, we struck out on it.
Thanks.
We got a couple of different questions kind of related to the same topic. So if you can kind of answer them in a batch, just about like, are there apps or sort of like a Birdcast for Raptors, or how you
Yeah, I'm gonna put an app. I'm gonna put an app in the chat right now. It's called Raptor ID. I'm just gonna put the Apple one in here right now. It's free. It used to be $20. I coughed up $20 back in the day to get this app. It's incredible, and the reason it's so incredible is, one, the person who made it is Jerry Ligouri. Jerry Ligouri is probably the foremost raptor authority in the country, especially migrating raptors and raptors in flight. And so he went around the country and filmed all of these raptors in flight. And they're not close, so you have to rely on shape. And he does a great job breaking it down and helping you understand why this raptor is the way it is. And it also, every single raptor has incredible photos, life history, identification points in flight, perched. Honestly, it's about as good as you can get compared to sitting next to somebody at a Hawkwatch that knows what they're doing. I think it's the next best thing. Jerry Ligouri also has a good number of books. Hawks at a Distance is probably the best for hawk watching, but there's also one called Hawks in Flight, or Hawks from Every Angle. There's also Hawks in Flight. I could put that there as well. But I'll put those books in the chat right now as well. But I think Raptor ID is probably the best.
It looks like Terrence has a couple of questions if you want to mute yourself and ask those in person. Let's see what other questions we've got here.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm sorry I don't have a webcam. Let me see. My two questions were first off, I'm in Louisiana.
Oh, okay.
And we actually went to Gulfport, Mississippi this past weekend, and I have not seen many Merlins. And when you showed the picture of the Merlin just then, I was wondering if might have been what I saw. I saw near the beach a raptor, going down, kind of scaring up the gulls and shorebirds. And we had one of those moonroof things, where you could look up and see. And the bird flew over me, and I could distinctly see I call them lamb chops, the sideburns.
Yeah.
And so I right away thought, oh, Peregrine Falcon, and that was the way it was moving. But I was wondering, is that a really large bird, and could it have perhaps been a Merlin that I would have seen? But would a Merlin be by the beach?
So a lot of falcons like being by the beach. There's a lot of birds. A lot of Merlins follow the beach and peregrines. But the one you're describing, especially because you saw, as you call them, the chops, the chops are way more obvious on a peregrine than it would be on a Merlin. And when you mentioned it, describing it scaring up gulls, peregrines love doing that, to the point where sometimes it almost seems like it's for no reason. I've seen peregrine falcons zoom in on a gull flock, everything flies away, and they just stand there and preen. Like you had the whole beach that you could have gone to, but you wanted to scare off all the gulls and land there to preen versus another area. So I would say they're also the bigger one to fly around and chase gulls. So I would say it sounds like you had a peregrine falcon.
Okay. And where are these raptors migrating from? Like you're saying, I love raptors. They're my favorite thing. I try to read about Hawkwatches as much as I can. Are they coming from like Canada and going down to South America, or is that basically?
It all depends on the species. So red-tailed hawks could be migrating from northern Wisconsin to central Illinois. Some won't migrate at all. Osprey are going to be migrating from Canada all the way to South America. Some will go, maybe some will stay in Florida, but most of them go all the way. Peregrine falcons, we've got some that are going to go from the Arctic Circle all the way down to Tierra del Fuego. I mean, these birds are all over there. Broadwing hawks, all of them leave the continental U.S. and go to South America. Swainson's hawks all leave the U.S. I think some maybe stay in Florida over the winter, but overall, it all depends on the bird. I mean, we'll have some Merlin that overwinter here, but it's not that common. Some peregrine falcons live here year round. So migration can be massive and it can be small.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
I see Laura put an interesting encounter with an osprey, if you want to talk about that one.
Okay. Yeah, I put in the date. It was September 5th because I was so shocked to see this osprey just sitting perched in a tree in Ryerson Woods for a really long time. And it was funny to me because where he was pointed and looking was at the sheep. If you know Ryerson Woods, you know, I thought this guy is confused, you know. But what I was wondering is, how did he get there? September 5th, I did look on one of the Facebook bird groups, or maybe even Hawkwatch, that let me know there were osprey coming through. But you know, it's so close to the Des Plaines River. I was wondering if that is also significant in fall migration, or is it mostly just the coast of the lake?
Rivers play a big role. Rivers are a good food source. It's good. Usually rivers are forested, so it's good cover as well. So a lot of raptors can rest there. So rivers are a big deal. Lake Michigan is important for raptor migration, not because the lake itself is necessarily some incredible place for raptors, but the lake acts like a barrier. And so raptors are concentrated there because they have to be. Migration's tough. You know, raptors migrate on a broad front, and a lot of them are very much attracted to rivers. So the Mississippi River, if you ever go out there in late September, what I would say, we don't have a Hawkwatch out there, and we should. There's a spot called Chestnut Mountain out in northwestern Illinois. We should have a Hawkwatch there. That would be an incredible place to watch migrating broadwing hawks. But your osprey was probably following the river or got tired and decided to sit. Migration, hawks included, can kind of put birds in weird places. And so, you know, an osprey sitting over a sheep farm and looking down and looking around, probably just tired, probably going to go look for some fish on the Des Plaines River if he hadn't already found some.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, can I ask one more quick question?
Sure.
If we see a hawk that, I have a particular hawk that I call my girl, but she has a wing tag, and she's number 113. But if we see a marked bird with that kind of a tag, is there a place we can go to learn about the bird?
I'm going to try to speak on that, but I'm not entirely sure. So if somebody else knows the answer to it, please let me know. But I have a feeling a lot of those birds were tagged in O'Hare, I believe, and that's where they're coming from. And I'd have to do a little bit of research, Laura. I know your email, so I can send you some ideas about where to send information to. But I'm not sure what you would do to look up where that raptor came from. But I would imagine that there is a way. But I think they came from O'Hare. If anybody else knows the answer, please chime in and let me know or correct me.
I do know the story about that particular hawk, and it's amazing. And you're right. It was relocated many years ago. And when I was lucky, I was confused. I thought hawk abuse, somebody put this big, because it's big, they're big tag, and I never heard of that before. And it actually was had a juvenile, and this is like 4 or 5 years ago. And I was able to take some photos, and I just submitted them to Lake County Forest Preserve, to Nan Buckert. Anyway, it turned out that they were happy to see that not only had she survived, but that she had offspring so many years later. And it was very exciting. I just wonder if normal humans can, if we're lucky enough to see something like that, where do we go to research it? But
I'm gonna have to look up where to do that. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'm gonna have to do some research. I'm not sure. Let's take a look and see what else we got. Any recommendations or spots or strategies to find northern goshawk in winter in northern Illinois? One is good luck. Finding them, I think, in migration is probably your best bet. So migration is starting now. I was kind of hoping to see one today, but didn't see one. But from now until about mid-November, or maybe a little early November, is probably their peak when they migrate through here. Choose a day after a cold front, and then whenever somebody asks me, like, when do you think the northern goshawk's going to fly by, I'm just going to say, I'll let you know when I see it, because I don't know. They could fly early in the morning. They could fly in the middle of the day. They could fly late at night, or not late at night, late in the evening. It really depends. And so I think the people that have seen the most goshawks in Hawkwatch sites have stayed for the whole day or just got really lucky. But when it comes to finding one wintering, I think you got to find the kind of food they like. So up at north, they're eating snowshoe hares. We don't have any snowshoe hares around here, but they're definitely going to go for bigger targets. I could see them going after pheasant. I could see them going after ducks. So you have to find their habitats, which are going to be woodland and edges, and find their prey, which is probably going to be ducks. So I imagine like a duck pond, or like somewhere rural where there's a decent number of pheasant or other kind of large bird prey that they can go for, rabbits. But finding them, I mean, people love goshawks because they're hard to find, and they're very difficult to find in Illinois. So another person is asking about bald eagles in Door County. If you want to unmute and ask the question, you can. If not, I can address it. Bob Morissette.
It's actually my wife who did it, so I'll let her.
Okay.
We saw two bald eagles circling and fishing in Door County this past weekend, and I was wondering, will they stay there, or will they move on and then migrate down to like Starved Rock or to Florida?
Yeah, they'll probably migrate to, I would say they're probably going to migrate because everything's going to freeze up there. Probably migrate to the Illinois River or the Mississippi River. Some of the biggest concentrations of wintering bald eagles in the whole country, I mean, really is on the Mississippi and Illinois. One of the best places you can go and see them. So I would say they go there. I'm not sure if they're going to go all the way south to Florida. I'm not sure off the top of my head what the numbers are as far as how far some of them go. I know a lot of the bald eagles in Florida are also year-round. In fact, some of the bald eagles that migrate over Fort Sheridan, we have a big migration of them in September as well. And some of them are post-breeding wandering birds. So they're like bald eagles that nested farther south of us, and then the young migrate north to just explore, and then they migrate south again. And so in September, we get a lot of juvenile bald eagles that are kind of in that same frame of mind. So that might have been a bald eagle that, you know, nested somewhere near Florida and just decided to migrate north for a bit and then hang around and then go back down south. But yeah, overall, if there's open water along rivers, bald eagles could be there.
So will they go back to the same place every year?
I think sometimes they do, but I'm not sure off the top of my head what their strategies are as far as where they go. I would imagine it's not necessarily the going to the same spot every year, but going to where the biggest concentration of food is. So the same spot every year might not have the same amount of food, but I imagine a lot of them are probably going to go to the Mississippi River. It's just where on the Mississippi are they going to be concentrated.
And then all the birders talk about, oh, the winds are from the northwest today. It's going to be great birding. How do I figure out, like, what app do I go to figure out all these winds?
There's an app called Windy that I think is really good. I think it's pretty valuable. I'm going to put it in the chat here. It's just a good wind app that can kind of show you what the winds are going to be. Is it an app? It should be an app. If not, there's definitely a website you can check out.
Well, that's what birders kind of check, like the forecast for this weekend. Do you look at that and say, okay, Saturday is a better day to bird than Sunday, or?
Right. So honestly, migration, anybody who says with a lot of confidence that they know that's going to be a good flight more than 3 days out is not necessarily talking truthfully, or at least without enough time and knowledge. Hawkwatch, weather can be really unpredictable. But basically, I use windy and I go to like weather.gov and check some fronts that are migrating through. But really, it kind of starts to solidify about 3 to 4 days outside of when the day is supposed to happen. And that's when all of the models start to agree. But what you're really looking for is west wind after a cold front. And windy, that site I just put in, is going to be probably the best one for checking the winds. But remember, west winds, any kind of west winds are going to bring in raptors, but the best ones are after a cold front with a pressure drop. That's when it's going to be the best. So I would say windy's a good one. Going to, let me put another one in here. So I like using just some of the forecast maps. So this will be a kind of a good place to explore around here, just from weather.gov is a great place to explore around some of the forecast maps as well. Steve Huggins asks, what day will there be a ferruginous hawk at Fort Sheridan? It's going to be the day when you finally show up, Steve. That's when there's going to be so if you just let me know when you're going to be here, and I'll get him on the cell phone. We'll make it happen. I would like to. That's a dream bird for me at the Hawkwatch.
You got to promise me good weather. I'll come up.
Depends on what your definition of good weather is.
Hawkwatching weather.
Hawkwatching weather. Oh, yeah. That sounds good. This coming Sunday could be good for hawkwatching, but the problem is, this is what I was talking about when it comes to being uncertain about weather. Right now, one model shows there being a bunch of rain, possibly even snow on Sunday. Hate to break anybody's heart if you didn't know that was possibly in the forecast. But another model shows it not raining. And so really, maybe tomorrow the models will all start to agree and we'll know if it's going to be too rainy for hawks. But if it's not, Sunday looks really good. Good west winds after a cold front, nice and cold.
On that note, rain or snow, I'm sure people all want to get out there. How do they figure out how to, join you, or what time to come out and visit the Hawkwatch?
Sure. Best times to visit the Hawkwatch. I will post a link to Fort Sheridan and to Illinois Beach. If you're on Facebook, it's probably the easiest way because we're really active on Facebook for the Fort Sheridan page and the Illinois Beach page as well. But like I said, hawk count is also a good place to go. But we basically start counting usually around 8 a.m. and go to about 3 p.m. Sometimes on a good day, we're going to start earlier. With COVID, it's been a little bit different. So it's not just kind of like walk up and start talking to people. Right now, we kind of have a counters area designated around the picnic table so that only the counters can be in there. But there's plenty of room to spread out to watch hawks. And that's the same thing at Illinois Beach as well. But rain or shine, on a rainy day, you're probably going to be disappointed. So I wouldn't come to a Hawkwatch on a rainy day. Did that answer the question? I'm not sure if I answered everything there. All right, here's the Facebook, putting that in the link for Fort Sheridan. Let me find the Illinois Beach State Park Hawkwatch as well.
Tatiana has an interesting question about the opposite side of Lake Michigan and how that affects hawk migration.
Where is that question?
It's scrolling by as we go. Tatiana, would you like to unmute and ask that question yourself?
Oh, okay. So Tatiana, that's actually going to be the opposite for you guys. Best winds for you in Southwest Michigan is going to be east winds, because those are the winds that are going to blow raptors close to the lake on your side. So when you're over there celebrating a good raptor day, we're kind of cursing the sky where we are, because east winds are kind of the kiss of death when it comes to good hawk migration in Illinois. But basically, anytime you have a land barrier, it's all about how do the raptors get to the land barrier to then decide what they're going to do. So in the spring, there's Hawkwatches along some of the east-west running Great Lakes, and raptors will move up the lake there. They'll hit that, and they'll probably go either east if they want to go to Canada, west if they're going to Michigan, and that's where they count there. So it's all about how the raptors get to the barrier. What are some of the differences between some of the birds at Illinois Beach and Fort Sheridan? Now, that's a good question.
Might as well throw in Green Valley while you're at it.
Yeah, Green Valley. I'll start with Green Valley. Green Valley is more inland. Green Valley gets more broadwing hawks. Broadwing hawks especially avoid the lakefront if they can, and so they tend to get bigger numbers of broadwing hawks in September. They also get larger numbers of sandhill cranes. They tend to have better numbers of turkey vulture as well. Really big turkey vulture days can happen at Green Valley. As far as the differences between Illinois Beach and Fort Sheridan, we're still trying to figure out what the differences are. There's been days where it seems that we being Fort Sheridan, tend to see more of the buteos, so more red-tailed hawks. And then I find that overall the trend seems to be that Illinois Beach tends to see more falcons. One of the reasons could be that they're a little bit more inland, a little bit farther, like by like a quarter mile west inland from the lake. And they also have a tree line that's a little farther away. So it gives a lot bigger of an area to view a falcon going by. And my theory right now for why we tend to see more buteos is because the lake tends to pinch in near Fort Sheridan. And I think it concentrates some of them as they're moving south down the lake. But really, we're still trying to figure out this answer as to what the differences are. Some days we have very similar numbers. Some days we have drastically different numbers. But I think the main point is that we're both counting at the same time, and we're getting a full picture, or not a full picture, but a clearer picture of what's actually happening with raptors as they migrate down the lakeshore. Because it used to be that we thought, well, we're just going to see exactly the same birds. It's kind of like you get in the interstate and then you drive down and you're going to pass the next stop. But now we're beginning to realize that hawk migration might be more dynamic. So they might go to the lakefront and then kind of swing back out and then swing back in and swing back out. And so having two counts on the lakeshore gives us a more complete picture of what's actually happening.
I actually have a question I've been sitting on and seems relevant to what you just said. If we were to, we have these 3 premier Hawkwatch sites. If we were to throw down another Hawkwatch site somewhere in the Chicago region, what would be an area that you think would be of most interest and optimal for a new Hawkwatch site?
Well, oh man, I think a Hawkwatch in the city would be awesome. I know there's some impromptu ones going on a few rooftops around the area, and they find some cool stuff. And it's fascinating because we're also seeing different birds. More turkey vultures sometimes. I don't know, Steve, you remember what the big turkey vulture day was that you guys had, but they've gotten more turkey vultures than us.
Yeah, I had like 400 the one day, in Illinois Beach only had about 130.
So I mean that to me is just remarkable. I mean, part of the theory with that is the farther south you go, more birds are getting into the pipeline. So like more birds that were inland. It's kind of like if you're on the interstate. If you get on the interstate at Wisconsin and you're going south on 94, the traffic's going to get more and more jammed as more and more cars are getting onto the interstate. So that's one of the theories as to why the farther south you get, the more birds you might see, because there's more things getting pushed in. But we don't really have the full picture as to why certain raptors are doing that. That's why I think it's important that we gather kind of a big data set.
Well, I don't see any other questions other than the big question of whether or not Steve has a vulture feeder. But I think would be really cool is if you could share a story with us about a time where you were just floored. You're like, man, this is an incredible experience. This is the life right here, the life of a Hawkwatcher.
Oh man. Anytime there's a decent flight, I think I kind of feel like that. I think one of our best days was probably let me see if I can probably find the exact day in hawk count. I believe it was in 2016. And I think I mentioned earlier that we are not really well known at Fort Sheridan for getting big numbers of broadwing hawks. Broadwing hawk numbers tend to be scarce. Every once in a while, if we get the right weather system, we can get them. And we happen to have that right weather system in 2016, where we had west winds at the end of September, which rarely happens. Let me see if I can find it. There it is. So it was September 27th, 2016. I can put the link to the day's summary. So if you go to Hawk Count, oh, I sent it to somebody privately. That was my bad. Let's send it to everybody. So sorry, Tatiana, it's not just going to go to you now. So it was a very big flight. We had over 4,000 migrating hawks that day. Over 3,000 of them were broadwing hawks. We also had 401 sharp-shinned hawks migrate by, 49 northern harrier, 65 Merlin, 12 Peregrine Falcon, a red-shouldered hawk, bald eagles, osprey. It was just an all-day experience. And what was great about it, in fact, that photo in my presentation at the end of everybody kind of standing around was from that day. And what was nice about it is that I was busy counting with Karen Lund. She was the other counter there. And so we were hyper-focused on making sure that we're counting all of these birds. And broadwing hawks, what makes them difficult about counting when you're new to raptors is that they're swirling in this big mess. And so it becomes difficult when you're looking at them to count them. But the secret is that you wait for the raptors to get all the way to the top of the thermal, and then they start gliding out, and that's when you count them. And so throughout the day, there was a prescribed burn north of us, and so that gave us some of the only cloud cover we had in the beginning, was literally watching these birds on the backside of smoke. And Karen would be, or I would be looking at this kettle of broadwings, and I would just ask Karen if she was ready, and she would say ready, and she had the clicker, and I would start counting by tens. They were migrating in such big numbers that we had to count by tens when they were migrating out. And so they would get to the top of the stream, and then they would migrate out. So there were kettles over kettles over Sheridan Road. There were kettles over the lake. There were kettles overhead. It was madness for like 7 hours straight. And from a Hawkwatcher standpoint, it was really tiring, but I really liked seeing everybody else taking in Hawkwatching. There was somebody there who was there for the first time, and she just went off to the side and just laid on the ground and just looked up and just watched migrating hawks the entire day. So I was kind of jealous. So that's what I wanted to do, but I was busy counting the whole time. But that was a very special day.
Well, I don't see any other questions. I think that's a fantastic note to go out on here. So again, big round of applause, and thank you to Adam for sharing your knowledge, your stories, and your time with us this evening. Holy cow.
Thank you guys.
Thank you all, obviously, the audience, for being here and joining us this evening as well. I hope you guys enjoyed it, had a good time, learned a thing or two. I'm going to pass it over real quick to Chris, who can better highlight our sponsor brewery of the evening, other than my clunky intro version. Chris.
Hey, everybody. First of all, thanks, Adam. I mean, that was spectacular. Sorry I was late. I missed the beginning, but, you know, work, it gets in the way sometimes, unfortunately. Anyway, so one of the big things about Birds and Bytes is that, you know, it's a riff off of the Birds and Beers. So we wanted to make sure that during, you know, these virtual meetings that we still gave a shout out to our brewery partners. And last year, our Hawkwatch edition Birds and Beers was at Half Day Brewing over in Lincolnshire. So it's like ye old Half Day Road and Milwaukee Avenue. A great little spot, you know, it's large. They've got a lot of beer, pretty good menu. They're very friendly to us, very friendly people. And, you know, if you're up hawk watching, you know, feel free to slip down Half Day Road after Fort Sheridan. It's only maybe, you know, maybe 8 miles away from the Hawkwatch site. So they do a great job. And, you know, everyone go, you know, have a beer, tell them Birds and Beers or COS sent you. And,
yeah.
We'll get some more, you know, one day we'll get back to like an actual brewery. So that'll be good. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Adam.
Always good to do the goodwill. The birders are supporting local business, right? So, and on that note, again, thank you all so much for being here. If you enjoyed the program, please consider donating or even becoming a member of COS. We do these programs for free and open to the public. We're going to be posting it publicly online for you guys to view at your leisure again when we're done here. But the only way we can do that is with the help of our members here. So, definitely consider hopping over and becoming a member if you aren't already. I dropped that link in the chat. Additionally, we are going to be out doing a big sit this Saturday at Big Marsh Park. While it's not a premier hawk watching spot per se, I guarantee we will be seeing Raptors on our sit this weekend. So
that's a big guarantee.
If you're not already joining for Fort Sheridan or you live on the south side, I'm just saying, Big Marsh might be the place to be this weekend. But I dropped that link in the chat as well. So once again, thank you all so much for joining this evening. Thank you, Adam, for being a fantastic guest host here tonight. Really appreciate it. And on that note, have a great night, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week and weekend. And hopefully we'll see you guys in real life or the next program sometime soon. Take care.
See you, everybody.